achieved.
Welcome back to Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions. As always, I am your host, Scott Johnson. And on this episode of the show, we're taking a look at the upcoming UFC 159 Jones vs. Sonnen card. I'll be giving you my 5 main card predictions on this episode, and all of my preliminary breakdowns will be available over at kamikazeoverdrive.net. I've changed up the way I do my prelim breakdowns a little bit. It allows me to make them a little bit shorter, but still provide just as much information. Coming off a pretty solid night, I went 8-4 at UFC on Fox 7. Started off 1-3, had a couple tough fights to get going, but won 7 of the final 8 fights and finished strong, including picking Josh Thompson to upset Nate Diaz. Bet packs will be on sale for UFC 159. I'm making a slight change. I'm cutting them back. I'm just going to make one bet pack at $10. It's going to cover everything it always covers. The parlays have been a little bit inconsistent. Sometimes I have great nights with parlays, some nights I don't have. So I'm going to cut them back just a little bit, but $10 for the whole thing. Again, they are on fire outside of the parlays. My confidence list, my prop bets, my fight-by-fight breakdown, giving you information. For example, I did pick Hugo Viana to beat TJ Dillashaw, but in the bet pack I said probably the best bet here is to take the total rounds under, because that, it covers both a potential knockout by Viana or a knockout or submission by Dillashaw, and that hit. And that's what you have to look for in these things. Or for example, Masvidal and Means going over. Even though I picked Team Means, I still got a winning. I was correct with one of my predictions for that fight and one of the bets I suggested that you make. So the bet packs will be available over at kamikazeoverdrive.net. Also, the public picks. I'm keeping all the stats, and there's trends starting to show up, and they're starting to pay off big time with certain fighters, and you can see when the public's in favor of certain guys when they come through and when they don't. Also, the Kamikaze Overdrive prediction tournament in full swing. I said we're in double digits now as far as registrants are concerned. You still have time to sign up, but don't wait to the last seconds. I will cut it off at an even number, and we will go from there. But please sign up. It's only $5. It's a whole bunch of fun. And you can get all the information on the website. And as always, thank you very much to all of my sponsors. I have 5 fights I want to get into, so let's get to my first prediction. Our opening prediction of the main card takes place in the UFC's lightweight division as 22-4-0 Jim Miller battles 31-15-0 Pat Bam Bam Healy. Miller is coming off a very entertaining win at UFC 155 over Joe Lozon, while Healy has ripped off 6 consecutive victories fighting for Strikeforce and now moving over to try and apply his trade under the UFC banner. Now, both guys are very talented grapplers. Miller's a former NCAA Division I wrestler and a BJJ black belt. Healy competed as a Division II wrestler in the NCAA, so both very good on the mat. Miller, 12 of his 22 wins have come by sub, and Healy, equally as impressive numbers, 15 of his 29 victories have come by submission. Now, on the opposite side of things, Miller has been sub once, and it was recently by Nate Diaz. Well, Pat Healy has been taken out 6 times by submission. That's something to consider against a very talented grappler like Miller. Now, another thing to look at here, Miller's been fighting top-level competition for a while. Guys like, Frankie Edgar and Gray Maynard and these guys. Well, Pat Healy's been fighting good prospects, but some lower-level guys. The last time he stepped up and took on a high-name opponent was Josh Thompson, and he had not a bad showing, but he eventually got submitted in that fight. Miller, he's a very strong striker, and he showed it in that Lozon fight. He came out and blitzed him, had some brutal level trajectory elbows, and he really took it to Lozon. He did slow down late, but he held a high pace, and you expect a guy to slow down when you're really putting a beating on an opponent like that. Healy is a serviceable striker, but he has been knocked out 4 times, and we saw in recent fights against Carlos Fodor and Maximo Blanco, he got rocked in the opening stages by just some quick shots, so I question his chin just a little bit. Now, Healy is a grinder. He seems to slow down just a little bit, but he's also very good at coming back from slow starts and getting going, in the later stages. So it's kind of one of those things where it's like, he's not a great conditioned guy who's going to blow the doors off somebody in a fight with his conditioning, but he just seems to keep moving forward and eventually getting the better of his opponent. He's a former welterweight, so he's very big. He's going to have a 4-inch height advantage and a 2-inch reach advantage, and he needs to use that in this fight. He's got a 71% takedown defense, but he has been taken down in fights before. We saw an uninspired performance against Mitsudo Hirota, where he was taken down twice. Fodor took him down once. Even Lyle Beerbaum took him down on a couple of occasions. And Miller has had some trouble with very good grapplers. His 4 losses against Ben Henderson, Gray Maynard, Nate Diaz, and Frankie Edgar, all very good grapplers. And Pat Healy's going to look to build upon that. Miller seems to be extra motivated in that Lozon fight. I expect him to come out and blitz Pat Healy. I thought about a TKO finish, but I'm going to go with Jim Miller defeating Pat Healy by submission. Our next fight is in the UFC's light heavyweight division as 10-1-0 with 1 no contest Phil Mr. Wonderful Davis battles 11-5-0 with 1 no contest Vinny Magalhaes. Davis is coming off a victory over Wagner Prado that followed a no contest against the same fighter. Well, Magalhaes returned to the UFC with a submission win over Igor Prokhyets, and he has now ripped off 6 consecutive victories, so very impressive in that sense for the former Ultimate Fighter finalist. And this is really a match of a BJJ against wrestling. Magalhaes is a second-degree BJJ black belt, 3-time world champion. 8 of his 10 wins have come by submission. Well, Phil Davis, NCAA Division I wrestler, he is a BJJ blue belt and very talented in that sense, and 4 of his 10 wins have come by sub, and he's shown a really improving submission game. And now one thing to keep in consideration, Vinny has been working with Chael, so that he certainly has experience dealing with wrestlers. Statistically, Davis averages 3.2 takedowns per fight at a 49% clip. He can shoot a double or a single, very effective. He's very strong, and he does an excellent job of striking and then ducking under his strikes to shoot in and put his opponent on the mat. Now, you think back to the last time he faced a high-level black belt, and he had a little bit of trouble with Little Nog on the ground. Couldn't get him to the ground, and he didn't mount much offense when he did get there, struggling to just maintain position. Now, on the other side of things, Davis' 73% takedown defense. The only guys who have been able to take him down in the UFC was Rashad Evans, who went 3 of 4. But Gustafsson did give him some trouble on the mat, and that was a very young Alex Gustafsson early in his career. What Magalhaes should be looking to do is tie up with Phil Davis and pull him to the ground. And anyway, you can, but Davis is a very good top game, very strong. It's not a place I think Vinny wants to be. But if he does get put on his back, Vinny's very dangerous. He works a rubber guard very well. And I'd say he needs to go for submission attempts early before A, he gets tired, and second, they get sweaty and it becomes harder to control. A very powerful and strong man. I think cardio is going to play a role in this matchup. Magalhaes slowed down against Igor Prokhyets early in that fight, despite being on the offensive. It was his re-debut, which can have some nerves involved with it. But he has also done in other fights. When he was fighting in M1, he had a number of fights where you could see he was gassing. Both guys are improving their striking and are trying to work on it. I would say Phil Davis has, he has the decent leg kicks. I give him an edge in the striking category if he can keep this fight standing, which I expect he's going to try to do. Davis doesn't have a lot of experience working on his back, and if Vinny can get him there, he needs to capitalize on any mistake he has the opportunity to deal with. And if Davis seems to slip a lot in the cage when he's moving, and if Vinny can capitalize on that and put him on his back, that would create some interesting scenarios. I expect Davis will look for some takedowns, but he needs to be very careful not to play in Vinny's guard, at least not early. I don't expect him to go for takedowns and wait till Vinny slows down a little bit. Davis will win the striking exchanges with his kicks, and he has some improving boxing, as I said, and I've got Phil Davis defeating Vinny Magalhaes by decision. Moving right along, we go to the heavyweight divisions now. Is 19-7-0 Big Country Roy Nelson battles 28-7-2 Cheick Kongo. Roy Nelson back-to-back wins, both by knockout over Dave Herman and Matt Mitrione. Will Kongo's coming off a decision victory, very uneventful, at UFC 149 over Sean the Savage Jordan. Now Kongo, like the heavyweight division, I always talk about this, a large size advantage, 4 inches of height, 9 inches of reach. Now on the other side of things, physically, Nelson improving his conditioning, getting in better shape, but he will slow down as well. Kongo, 10 wins by knockout, including knocking out guys like Pat Barry and Anthony Hardonk. And we saw him rock Cain Velasquez a couple of times in their matchups, so the guy has some serious power. Cheick's a solid kickboxer. He averages 3.53 strikes per minute, but he has a tendency to hesitate to pull the trigger and not sit down on some of his punches when he's under pressure. He can use the clinch game to shut down his opponents, as we saw against Mirko Krokop and Sean Jordan. Even Matt Mitrione uses those sometimes those knees that go a little south of the border that will slow an opponent down, whether they're legal or not. Now for Roy Nelson, he's got that iron chin. He's got 11 wins by knockout, and he's knocked out a pretty impressive number of guys like Matt Mitrione, Dave Herman, Mirko Krokop, Stefan Struve, Brendan Schaub. All guys are considered better athletes than Roy, but just couldn't hang with his power. Nelson throws a nice little jab and follows it with his overhand right, and he actually used an uppercut to take out Mitrione, which was nice to see him get inside of a guy who was taller and trying to use that distance. As I said, Mitrione taller, so was Dave Herman. They tried to use a kicking game to maintain distance, and Roy did an excellent job of getting inside with his little jab to lead the way and following with big-time power. One thing Nelson does is that he keeps coming forward, and that's something it works for him, but he also takes a lot of damage. He only lands 4.5 strikes per minute against getting tagged 4.81, and in most situations, that's not a good exchange unless you're Roy Nelson, who can do so much damage with one or fewer shots. Now, he did have some trouble both against Frank Mir and Fabricio Verdum in the clinch game, where he was able to use knees, and I think that's what Kongo's going to look to do in this fight, but Kongo's not the grappler either one of those two guys are. His ground game is a little underrated. As I already mentioned, he has a decent clinch game, But Frank Mir's been the only guy to actually take Roy Nelson down with consistency, and I don't think Kongo's going to have much success there. When you look back, when Kongo fought Mark Hunt, he had a little bit of trouble controlling Hunt on the cage, which is something, Mark Hunt not known for his grappling, but certainly Kongo had a bit of issues there. Nelson's a BJJ black belt. He has a good clinch game as well. He was able to pin Frank Mir on the wall for a bit, and that's a tough thing to do for a lot of guys. Kongo has a tendency in the exchanges to leave his head up when attacking and backing up as well, and that creates a target that Roy Nelson's going to want to move in and look at and land on. Kongo got rocked by a big right hand of Mark Hunt. He really couldn't recover, and he couldn't keep the distance against a smaller, shorter fighter, and that's what, again, Nelson, you look what Hunt did to Kongo, and you expect Nelson to try something very similar. Now, Kongo only has 2 losses by knockout, but you consider that Pat Barry rocked him, and so did Frank Mir. I think his chin's getting to the point where it's not nearly what it used to be. But for Nelson, he's 2-7 in fights where he can't finish his opponent. He needs to avoid getting outlanded in this fight, and his cardio diminished as fights go on. That's what Mir and Junior Dos Santos and Werdum were able to do, survive the big shots and outland and outwork Nelson for a decision victory. For Kongo, he needs to keep the distance, land a lot of leg kicks, and be careful when attempting to clinch up with Roy, which could, but he could lose that big weapon if Roy can shut down the clinch game of Kongo. What this comes down to is Nelson's power and Kongo's chin, so my prediction is Roy Nelson to defeat Cheick Kongo by knockout. Co-main event prediction time, and we are in the middleweight division as Michael the Count Bisping, 24-5-0, battles Alan the Talent Belcher, 17-6-0. Belcher's coming off a pretty disappointing loss to Yushin Okami that really cut his momentum down. Well, Michael Bisping, similar situation. He's now lost 2 of his last 3, coming off that knockout victory against Vitor Belfort that, again, really shut his ability down to climb that ladder. Belcher's a Duke Rufus-trained fighter. That's an excellent camp to come out of. A lot of good talented guys coming out of there. As he's well-rounded, he's kickboxing, Muay Thai, Taekwondo. He really throws a heavy kicking game. 9 of his wins by knockout. Very talented striker. Actually, 8 of his 9 UFC victories have come by finish, which was it's a very impressive list of wins. He's a BJJ black belt and judo black belt. He has 7 submissions, but he averages less than half a takedown per fight, which is not enough to be a threat against a guy like Michael Bisping unless he changes things up, which he may very well do coming off that heavy takedown loss he suffered against Yushin Okami. Now, Bisping is a very solid kickboxer, 14 wins by knockout, despite the fact that he's not given a lot of credit for what he's capable of with his hands. Knockout is damage by accumulation, or at least death by accumulation, as he just keeps attacking guys and eventually the damage builds up. We saw it against Jason Miller, against Jorge Rivera as well. He lands 4.49 strikes per minute and only absorbs 2.48, shutting down 70% of his opponent's offense, which is an impressive number, and in the decision fights, that's going to hold up in a lot of scenarios. Where Belcher, 2.79 strikes landed per minute, 2.71 absorbed, so very close in those situations. You better be landing the heavier shots if those are your output and input numbers. Bisping, excellent footwork and cardio. He needs to sit down on his punches to add some power, which he has been doing in the past. For Belcher, he uses a lot less movement. He's a little bit flat-footed, but that allows him to throw with power, and that's what he's going to look to do against Bisping. Michael has improving wrestling. He's up to almost 2 takedowns per fight at a 46% clip. We've really seen some improvements of late, and he's used takedowns to exploit his opponent's issues in the past. He went 5 for 9 against Vanderlei, 4 for 13 against Brian Stan. He even took Chael Sonnen down, which was quite impressive. That was a good performance for Bisping in that fight. He has some very fast takedowns. He does a nice job changing levels quickly. He sets them up with strikes, which makes them that much more effective. Now, Belcher has had trouble defending takedowns in the past. He has a 59% takedown defense, but Okami's top game in the last fight really was a major issue. Patrick Cote took him down twice, Akiyama and Dennis Kang each 3 times. Dave Herman put him on his back 5 times. And in his debut fight against Okami, same scenario, on his back 5 times. Now, Bisping's chin, seems to be his Achilles heel, especially against a big right hand. He's only lost by knockout twice, which against Dan Henderson and Vitor Belfort, 2 very dangerous strikers. But he has been hurt several times in fights. Brian Stan buzzed him. Kang hurt him. Rivera even clipped him, and Vanderlei nearly stopped him at the end of that fight. It was saved by the bell. Now, Belcher, for him, he needs to land his kicks and threaten with power and stuff the takedowns as well. Keep this fight standing and keep Bisping moving and back him off. Don't allow those striking numbers to pile up. Bisping seemed a little bit hesitant against Vitor Belfort. He can't afford that here because Belcher will capitalize on it. Alan Belcher, a very confident fighter. For Bisping, I said, needs to be very aggressive, land with high volume, and shoot for takedowns and land them and keep Belcher off his game. I think this is going to be a very close fight, but I've got Michael Bisping defeating Alan Belcher by decision. Main event prediction time, and it's for the UFC's light heavyweight championship. As the champion John Bones Jones, 17-1-0, battles Chael P. Sonnen, 28-12-1. Jones on an impressive winning streak. Only the 1 loss to Matt Hamill in his career. He's been taking out everybody they put in front of him, multiple UFC champions. Chael Sonnen coming off a middleweight title fight loss against Anderson Silva was preceded by wins over Michael Bisping and Brian Stanley. Before that, that other last-second loss to Anderson Silva as well. Now, for Chael, he hasn't fought at lightweight in a number of years, and I think he should have fought once before getting the shot. He was originally tied to a Forrest Griffin fight, but it just didn't happen. And what we have here is a match of a wrestler versus a very diversified and evolving striker in Jon Jones, or fighter in Jon Jones, not just a striker. Jon Jones can do it all. Physical advantages for the champ, 3 inches of height, 9 inches of reach, and that seems to be the story in almost all of his fights. Now, one thing to consider for Chael, he won't be as drawn out from cutting down to 185 pounds, which should help his performance. He clearly seemed to be a little bit diminished at middleweight, where light heavyweight he's going to be able to hold up. 20 more pounds should help him out a little bit. But Johnny Jones is going to be a bigger fighter than he was fighting at 185, so he might not be able to bully him around like he had success doing there. Now, the only people to beat Sonnen since 2007, which covers 10 fights, is Anderson Silva twice and Damian Maia. So Sonnen is no slouch no matter who he's been competing against, and he's fought some high-level guys. Chael's an NCAA Division I and Greco-Roman Olympic alternate wrestler. He has that brutal power double where he just powers through his opponents. 3.49 takedowns at 60%. Now, Jones is 100% takedown defense, but we really haven't seen anybody try a lot of takedowns against Johnny Jones. Sonnen, he's going to try and get in on those legs of Jones and really fire through. Bader went 0 for 2 and Rashad went 0 for 4. And it's not just what we found out. It's not just hard to take down Jon Jones. It's hard to get in a position to take down Jon Jones because of how well he manages that reach and what he can threaten with. Now, Chael is very strong. He's going to try and push through that, like I said, push through the legs of Jones and take him down. He went 4 for 7 against Michael Bisping, 4 for 6 against Brian Stan, 6 for 6 against Nate Marquardt, and even in his 2 combined fights, 4 for 11 against Anderson Silva, and that's not an easy task to do. Jones, 64% of his takedowns land, and Sonnen was put on his back in the Bisping fight, and he's not the same fighter when he can't dominate the takedown games as we saw against Michael, as Chael had some trouble getting him in a position to use his wrestling. Big number for Chael that stands out, 8 losses by submission. Even when he gets in the top position, he's vulnerable, as we saw against Anderson Silva, as we've seen against Paulo Filio in the WEC. And Jones has 6 wins by submission. He's tapped out a pretty impressive list of guys. Recently, Vitor Belfort, Lyoto Machida, Rampage Jackson, and Ryan Bader. So 4 of his last 6 wins have come by submission, so he's very much in that mindset where he'll be looking for opportunities to lock up some kind of submission hold against Chael Sonnen. Now, Jones is dominant from the top game with the ground and pound and those lethal elbows. And that's something we haven't seen Sonnen a lot on his back, and that's where Jones is going to want to put him. Johnny Jones' major advantage on the feet with his range and diversified striking repertoire. Sonnen is a respectable striker. We saw him rock Anderson Silva, but he really can't afford to stand and trade at distance with Jon Jones. He's just going to get picked apart, and really there won't be much of an exchange as he'll be taking and Jones will be dishing out. Now, Sonnen has been working with Vinny Magalhaes. He needs to get on top of this fight and break Jon Jones down like he did with Yushin Okami. Nate Marquardt and Brian Stan attempt submissions, which it's going to be difficult because every time he goes to attempt a submission, he'll have to relinquish a position potentially, and Jones will be looking to capitalize and get up if the scenario even pops up. Jones can win this fight standing, but I expect him to use a clinch game to break Sonnen down along the cage. And eventually even consider putting him on his back, drop some elbows, really control and put the wrestler in a position he doesn't like to be in. And my prediction is Jon Jones to defeat Chael Sonnen and retain his UFC light heavyweight title, and he's going to do it by defeating Chael Sonnen by submission. So those are my 5 main card predictions for UFC 159. No main card upsets. We'll have to look into the preliminary fights and see what we can dig up as far as upsets are concerned. As I said, the bet packs will be available at their new $10 price. I've been doing very well of late with them. My fight-by-fight breakdowns, I've almost been producing a winning pick for each fight, whether it be the total rounds over, the winner, or in some fights where they're lopsided, I'll come up with a prop bet that an outcome that, for example, Daniel Cormier taking him to take out Frank Mir by decision last night was a big payout for that fight. Also, the Kamikaze Overdrive prediction tournament. Please sign up ASAP, because the way it works, when I hit, for example, 32 is a good number for a tournament. If you are number 33 that signs up, just refund your money and your spot won't be reserved. So get in ASAP. It's first come, first served, and I'm keeping track of the order when people do sign up. Also, the public picks, make your picks, check out the trends. A lot of trends starting to show up with that section that can help you with your betting. And the prediction panel's been doing very well of late. Dylan Collins, a shout out to him at UFC on Fox 70, went 9-3 overall, had a very good night. So please check out those guys' predictions. They're very knowledgeable, just as much as I am. And we got a little break coming up, and I look forward to taking a week or so off. As always, thank you very much for listening. I appreciate all my viewers and all the websites that host and post my video, and I will see you right back here next time. Kamikaze Overdrive MMA Predictions.